Hi everyone, good evening. Odion, confirm you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. So in order to just respect our participants' time, I would like to just go start the webinar for today. So I welcome every one of you officially to today's event, a webinar organized by SPE Lagos section. Topic we are trying to address today is win-win negotiation, right? And we have a speaker with us, Amy Olof, that's going to, share tips with us on how to negotiate and not end up as a loser. I do believe that this event is going to be impactful for everybody, including myself, because I know points or at different points in our lives, there's always a need for negotiation, always a need to have back and forth conversations, trying to strike a deal, trying to buy something, trying to, improve conditions of a contract, whatever situation it may be. We're going to be able to learn today how to just negotiate and end up as right. John, can you move on to the next slide? So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Tony Akide Peters. I'm the Assistant Scholarship Chairperson for SPE Lagos section, and I'll be the moderator for today's event. Now on the screen right now, we can see the other events we have for today. The first item is this welcome address that I've already begun. And after that, I myself will be taking a safety brief on a very, let's say, regular topic. And after that, I'm going to introduce section chairperson and just let her take the opening remarks for the event. After that, I'm going to introduce our speaker. And after that, she's going to make a webinar presentation about 45 minutes. I would advise us to have our pen and notes just to take notes and also jot down questions if we may have them. After that, there's going to be a presentation summary, just, concluding or just trying to conclude all the things that I've made. And then we'll have Q&A. So like I initially mentioned, during the presentation, I indulge all our participants to ask questions in the chat box. Please, if you have any question about what Amy has said or what you want answers to, just put them down in the chat box. And during this Q&A session, we would also want to invite people unmute themselves and speak and ask questions themselves, because we're hoping that today is going to be rather interactive. We want to have it as a proper conversation, right? And this topic is something that everybody can relate to, irrespective of where you work or what you do right now. So after having the engaging conversation, Q&A, I would be making some announcements for SPE Lagos. We have some things we want to just share. And at the end of that, I'm going to invite our program chairperson, Mr. Oluwabi, for the vote of thanks. Now, on to the safety brief, cybersecurity. This is like I said, this is a very popular topic. So according to some research, I think I forgot to share my video. Let me just quickly do that. Sorry about that. So can you see me?
Confirm, we can see you.
Okay, yeah. So according to some research that I got encountered with, apparently attacks happen about 39 seconds, every 39 seconds on average, right? And that's pretty scary. So I wanted to talk about this topic to just sort of remind ourselves or to give us some tips about how to secure or just to be secure, how to avoid phishing scams, avoid social engineering scams, how to avoid harmful attachments that could, how to avoid all these things so that we are potentially safe and potentially save ourselves and our companies, costly data breach. So first things first, right? If you're working for a company or if you are, working for an organization and you get external emails, that is emails from external parties, one of the first tips is to please do not click on any in the email. If you find the email to be sketchy, if you believe that something doesn't add up right, please don't even click on any link there, because the moment you click, you open up yourself, you expose yourself and the company to potential data breach, which can lead to loss of money, which can lead to legal actions and so many other things. And in addition to not clicking on links and emails, it's also advisable and it's best practice not to open attach, right? Sometimes some of these attachments that are attached to the emails have some things that are just harmful to your PC and harmful to your system, right? So the moment you just open them, you also expose yourself and your company to potential breach, and you are just at, right? And one other thing I wanted to share today was that please try not to give out personal information over the phone or in an email. Sometimes you could get email invites or something about just emails that will be requesting you for some personal information. Please share this with us. Please share that with us. If for some reason you feel like this is sketchy, you feel like this is something doesn't just add up, right? Do not share those information. What you could do is to try to reach out to the company. And I don't mean calling the phone number in that same mail, because there's a high chance that if you call the same phone number in that same mail, you are going to reaching out to whoever is trying to like run a scam or whatever. So what you could do is go to the company website, obviously try to don't use any link, like I said, in the email. Try to find the company online, try to email them. You could make a snapshot of the email you just got. Is this legit? Just this rather lengthy process is much safer than just sharing whatever personal information you have to whoever you do not know. So some other general security tips, please use secure passwords, keep them safe and don't share with anyone, right? There are some people that for some reason write down passwords and keep it in their workspace, right? Which is not safe, because some people think, the workplace, it's safe. You never know, your password may end up in the wrong hands, right? And that leads me to my next tip, because some people are fond of taking selfies at work, life of an analyst, post it on Instagram, get many likes. You never know. Sometimes in the background of such pictures, your password, which was written and just like takes down to your screen, could be shared, and that exposes yourself and your company to potential data breach and loss of money, right? So please keep your password safe and secure. Don't share with anybody. And lastly, keep your operating system up to date. Keep your, antivirus software up to date. The companies that have like monthly security updates, right, which they would advise you to keep updating and installing. Please, and please, if you are working for such company that keeps doing these things, please just keep updating so that you're secure. So at this point, I'm hoping that I've been able to, just share a couple of tips. And I would like to move on to the next item of an agenda, which is the opening remark. And this will be given by our section chairperson, Mrs. Priscilla Nwere, if Mrs. Priscilla Nwere. So I would like to just invite you, ma'am. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar on win-win negotiation. It's a very apt topic that we're going to be discussing, because if you think about it, in every area of your life, you're negotiating for something, whether it's in raising children, it's in engaging with your spouse, with your family members, at work, professionally, we're always negotiating something. So I'm glad that we could bring this topic to discuss today. I had the pleasure of attending one of Amy's webinar, and it was a fantastic session, which was why we approached her. So please come and deliver it to the larger SPE members. I have no doubt that this session will be engaging, and we will leave here with better understanding than we had when we joined. To you all that have joined us today, please continue to follow SPE Lagos on all social media platforms to engage with us and to get first-hand information about all our programs, especially regarding our plans for SPE Lagos at 50. SPE Lagos has been in existence for the last years. In fact, SPE activities in Nigeria started with SPE Lagos. So it gives us great joy, gives all our achievements over 50 years. And I especially invite everyone to please join us on all of these activities. Thank you for joining, and please enjoy the session.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Section Chair, for that lovely opening remark. So just because of time, I'll just move on to introduce our speaker and read the speaker's bio. So like I initially mentioned, our speaker for today's webinar, the Win-Win Negotiation, is Amy Olof. And Amy is the Director of Professional Programs at Forte. a role in which she introduces women to new ideas and deep networks. She's on finding new ways to leverage and extend Forte's programming to support both professional women and the organizations in which they operate. Amy is also a co-author and architect for Forte Allies for Gender Equity, formerly Men as Allies initiatives, which offer men a framework to be stronger allies in gender equity. So prior to Forte, Amy was the Director of Professional Education and Training at the Graduate Management Admission Council, GMAC, managing a portfolio of on-site and online conferences, symposia, and training events. Prior to that, Amy was the Director of the MBA Program Office and Student Services at the Wharton School, University of Pennsylvania. Throughout her career, Amy has also worked as an educational consultant, providing clients with program design delivery, assessment, strategy inputs, and workshop facilitation and leadership program development. Amy holds a Master of Education from the University of Maryland, a Master of Government, and a BA in Communications from the University of Pennsylvania. She lives in Philadelphia with her human, canine, and feline daughters. So very, very interesting profile we have here. At this point, audio, next slide, please. I would like to just invite our speaker, Amy, to just give a presentation right now. Thank you very much, Amy.
Yeah, thanks, Tosin, for that intro. And I have to tell you, I found what you were saying about security really fascinating. I've taken to now double checking an email address. So even if it says it's from, like a certain company or something, I go in to actually see if the address looks like it be from the company. I'm not sure if that's something correct to do or not, but I really loved your tips because I'm always suspicious of emails when they come out of the blue.
Yeah, thank you very much. In fact, you just give one extra tip. Confirming the address is also something you could do outside just to confirm. As far as you don't click any link, I think that's very good.
Yeah, so sometimes I do that. Well, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because we're not here to talk about cybersecurity, although to tell you how important it is, we are here to talk about negotiations. And I think between Priscilla and Tosin, if there's one thing that you got from the intro so far, it's that everything is negotiable. And situations are not, when we talk about negotiations, we're not just talking about asking for a higher salary. We're not just talking about asking for a promotion. Priscilla said you negotiate with your children, you negotiate relationships, everything is negotiable, right? But that's not how we tend to think about it. So how many of you could do a show of hands, or you could write something in the chat. How many of you came to this session thinking, I need to negotiate for something like a higher salary or for promotion, and I feel uncomfortable, but that's the only reason I'm coming to this session, right? How many of you thought like of negotiations just in terms of asking for what you want and the answer is yes or no? Show of hands, you could put something in the chat because I will, yeah, thank you for raising your hand because I think a lot of us think that, right? And then we have an I did, right? Because a lot of us think that negotiation it's a one-time ask and it's yes or no. That's it that you're going for. That's not negotiations. So we're going to dive in there a little bit more. So thank you all for raising your hand and playing along. Wanted to tell you a little bit about Forte. Why? Well, you heard my background, but I want to tell you about Forte because it will explain to you why I'm interested in negotiations, but why I also approach everything, even though the tips are very valuable and the lessons are very valuable for those who identify as men and those who identify as women. I approach everything from a gender lens, looking at women first. Why? Occupational hazard, I work at Forte. So in 2021, a study came out by the University of Michigan, and it asked the question, why are there so few women in MBA programs, right? At a time when 50% of med schools and law schools globally actually were women, why were Masters of Business Administrations only in about 25% women, Masters of Business Administration programs, I should say. Well, the study came out, it cited a lot of reasons, and a small group of schools got together with a small group of companies and said, let's address these obstacles. Let's introduce women to the knowledge and networks about an MBA beyond stereotypes, right? That an MBA is all about making money. Let's introduce them to a group that they can prepare the process with, preparing for the MBA program. Well, you'll see Wharton is right here in the middle. And I was the director of student affairs at Wharton at the time. So I like to say this is me with the curly hair, right, in the picture. And I was a part of this working group. Stayed on with Wharton, went to GMAC, as Chosen said, and then came back to what I consider home, Forte, about 6 years ago, and really focus and use all of my MBA expertise, but focus on helping women develop. Why do I say that? Because we have the capabilities. It's using them sometimes so that we need the confidence to use them. So one of the biggest areas in, sorry, I forgot about this slide, but let me just share with you. We've made progress, right? So you could see that the number of business schools at Forte, the number of women at business schools really has grown. So we have a greater percentage at over 40% than when we started, where we had none, right? So we're really, one of the benefits of working with MBA women is I get to meet faculty from our partner schools. And I had the pleasure of meeting these two women, Sarah Leshever and Linda Babcock. Now, let me tell you something about them. These two are considered gurus when it comes to women and negotiations. They wrote seminal books that even though they're over 10 years old, they are still widely read today and among the most popular books on negotiations for women. The first, Women Don't Ask, talked about all the reasons why women don't tend to negotiate, right? Their second book, Ask for It, gave a lot of practical advice. This, with their blessing, this presentation is composite pieces of everything that's in these two books. So I just want to tell you, like, I cannot take credit for coming up with any of this information. It all goes to Linda and to Sarah. Okay, two views of negotiations. Stereotypically, that doesn't mean all men, but as a general rule, they say that men think of negotiations, like a sporting event, right? It's, I'm going to go in there, I'm going to win. It's fun, it's energizing, right? You have to be at your best shape, but you're going to go in there and you're going to conquer. Women, on the other hand, when they were surveyed, and this was an actual survey that was done by Michelle Gelfand. She is a professor at Stanford, Stanford Graduate Business School. When Michelle did the survey, she found that more women thought about negotiations. They likened it to going to a dentist, right? An experience that it's not a good experience, right? So so I'm just kind of curious, just put in the chat, and yes, there was a comment in there. Please put your questions in the chat at any time. I'm just kind of curious, how many of you think about negotiations as going to the dentist? And I'm raising my hand because I'm going to tell you I am one of them. I used to think about it that way. How many of you think about negotiations like a trip to the dentist or something really unpleasant? Thank you, Priscilla. Yeah. It's as we think about negotiations, as I said before, as this limited interaction. I'm going to encourage you from here on in to stop thinking about it as a limited interaction. Okay, so let's dive in. As we said before, there's opportunity to negotiate, right? In all aspects of life, whether it's with your family, whether it's with significant others, whether it's when you're purchasing something, right? And certainly professionally. But what we tend to forget is not only is negotiations all around us, but everything is negotiable. If you think about it, any kind of leadership, any kind of relationship involves negotiations. How many of you found yourself making plans to go out, I don't know, shopping and with another person, and you have to decide what store you're going to, right? Sometimes you agree, but sometimes you don't. And you have to negotiate that. Everything is negotiable. Why is everything negotiable? Because negotiations is really about relationships. Again, from here on in, I want you to stop thinking about negotiations as one-off transactional experiences. I want you to think about them as relationships. That's great. So what does that mean? Well, if you think about them as relationships with people, right, you have opportunities, different opportunities. It all comes down to style. In relationships, you can exercise different styles, right, at different times. Not every situation calls for you to act the same way in every single relationship, right? So I'm going to use a parent-child example for those of you who have children, or just even read a story about, you know, a parent-child relationship. Sometimes with your child, you're fun. And sometimes you're like, yes, let's do that. Let's go have the treat. But sometimes you have to be stern, and you have to be the parent, and you have to say that is not allowed. And then there's other times when you're equals, right? You're just playing a game and you're just equals. You're not the same person, and you don't, or I should say you are the person, you don't act the same in every relationship at every minute of every day. So why would you think about negotiations any differently? So when it comes to negotiations, it's important to understand that there are 5 styles of negotiations, okay? The first is competitive. This is that classic example. This is that one-off interaction that we were talking about, right? That is, I win, you lose. In order for me to get what I want, for me to win, you have to lose, right? This is the style that we usually think about. This is that style when we were talking before and we said we're getting geared up for the game and we're going to go in and it's a one-off transaction. And sometimes it is a one-off transaction. We'll get to that. But this is what we typically think of when we think of negotiations, right? Here, your style has to be assertive. It's not cooperative, right? Why would you cooperate? You want to get what you win. It favors a hard approach, right? You have to be firm. You have to know what you want. You can't be yielding or unbending, right? You know what you want. So competitive is certainly a style of negotiations, but it's only one. What's the next one? The next one is accommodating. Oh, I should mention before I go on, there's a handout. And we could put a tap for you, or somehow Priscilla, Tosin, maybe you could figure out a way to get it to the group. But I have a handout with all of this information. So just so that you'll have a takeaway from this piece too. I always like takeaways. But moving back to style, accommodating. Accommodating is I lose, but you win, right? Not assertive, you're not cooperative, right? It's a soft approach. I give up. I'm so sorry. Didn't mean to like offend you, and of course you can have your way, right? It favors a soft approach. There are times when you need to be like this. You might be thinking to yourself, well, why would I ever want to do that? Again, we're going to go through when these are valuable in a little bit. Next style, avoiding. Avoiding is I lose, you lose, right? Okay, this was really difficult. This was uncomfortable. I really didn't like the way this played out. Let's just both walk away and forget it ever happened, right? You're not really being assertive. You're not really being cooperative. You're just being avoiding. You're avoiding any interaction altogether. You're walking away. And then there's compromising, right? And this we always think of the opposite of competitive. There's competitive, I win, you lose, right? But you always think, okay, well, if we don't want to be competitive, we'll compromise. I lose some, I win some, you lose some, you win some. We always think about it that way, right? But if you take a step back, does anybody really win-win? You're not getting everything you want. The other person isn't getting everything that they want, right? It's, it's neither cooperative nor uncooperative. It's just, we're going to give a little. You know what? We can't all be 100% happy all the time. A lot of people think that this is the best situation you can have in negotiations, right? That you compromise, you reach an agreement. That's not the best. The best is collaborating. This is the win-win negotiation. This is I win and you win. This is where you're assertive. You're still assertive, but you're cooperative. You think about every step of the negotiations process a little bit more strategically, a little bit more uniformly, right? Favors a principled approach. Okay, I could get what I want in this situation, but I think there's a way that you can get what you want to. So what are these situations, right? It's hard to imagine a situation in which avoiding isn't terrible, right? Okay, you walk away. I mean, unless you really need something, maybe it's not so bad. So let's go through styles, but talk about when each one would be of use to you. Let's start with our favorite battle, our competitive. I win, you lose. As much as I said to you, do not think of negotiations as a one-off transaction. Here's what I'm going to say. Sometimes you do have one-off transactions, right? Not always, but sometimes you're going to a place that you don't know. A lot of times we use an example of buying a car. You're going to a car dealership, right? You're buying a car. You're not going to have a relationship with that person in the future. You can be a little bit more assertive. The problem is, and I don't know about your situation, but I will tell you that I have bought my car from the same dealership for the past 20 years. I've only had, 2 cars in the past 20 years, but I've used the same dealer. Not only the same dealership, the same dealer. I really like him. I have a relationship with him. I don't use the competitive style with him. If I were going to a new dealership, I might start out that way. Figure, what do I have to lose? But if you think there's a chance of a relationship going forward, you might not want to start with this. But certainly, if you're going into a buying situation where you know it's going to be a one-off, this is fine, right? This is fine. You definitely have to be firm, and you have to be clear about what you want. That's competitive. Okay, let's talk about accommodating, right? Why would you want to accommodate? I'll be honest, I've been in this situation many times. Sometimes you're at fault. There was a work situation once when I was working at Wharton. It was not a huge issue, but it was not great. I spent $10,000. I told you it was not great on materials that it turns out we couldn't use because they had incorrect information. later on, they asked me if I could give up a share of my budget to make up for the shortfall. What was I going to do? I was wrong. I was the one that authorized the printing. I was the one that didn't proofread it correctly, right? We couldn't use those materials. I was at fault. Yeah, I lost. But did I have a choice? Yes, they presented it to me as, look, we can try to take it from all departments equally, but we think it might be more fair if you just give up this part of your budget. It did impact the way I did work. It, cut budget for other things. I didn't have a position to argue from, right? Sometimes we're in that situation. We're at fault. We make a mistake. In that case, why would you spend your time trying to negotiate and argue? Especially if you think about negotiations as a relationship. If you give in this situation where clearly you are at fault, think about how much easier it's going to be the next time you get into a situation where you're negotiating in that same relationship. Let's go to avoiding. Avoiding's interesting, right? Avoiding's interesting. You think, why do I want to avoid? Sometimes the value just outweighs the benefit. Not sure if anyone can relate this, but my guess is yes. But every once in a while with my significant other, we get into an argument and we start arguing about something minor. And all of a sudden our emotions get involved and this becomes the most important thing in the world to us. And when we're talking about where we're going to dine that evening, is that really that important? No. Is it worth jeopardizing that relationship? No. Sometimes avoiding is come back and think, are you letting emotions get in the way? Is what you're arguing about really that important? We all know that in negotiations, right? Things escalate, right? Emotions get heated sometimes, but don't let those emotions carry you on. Don't let them dictate your next action. Come back to the value of what you're arguing for. Okay. Compromising. Once again, this is what we tend to think about when we think about like kind of the win-win negotiation, right? Sometimes you have to compromise because you don't have anything left to offer, right? We're meeting both sides. I'm going to give a little, you're going to give a little, or I'm going to give a little bit more, you're going to give a little bit more. We really want to get to that win-win, but I don't have anything left to give. And not only do I not have anything left to give, pretty sure you don't have anything left to give either. At this point, you might want to ask for a compromise, right? So it's not that you're not working towards the collaborating model, you are, but there's only so much you can maneuver the situation, especially if it comes down to money or if it comes down to your time. There's only so much time you can give. There's only so much money you can give, right? So compromising is not bad. And there are times when compromising is the best solution, and that's when you have nothing left to offer. So what about collaborating? Collaborating is when relationships are key, right? If you work, if in your professional position you work with a supplier, and that supplier is a long-term relationship, right? Think about, even if you can't get a win in this situation, you know that there's going to be a relationship ongoing. Could you parlay that? Could you parlay maybe a situation where you don't benefit into a better situation, which you do benefit a little bit later on? Now, some people argue that this is compromising, right? I give now, you give later. Not. It's about understanding that what's key here is not the one-off transaction. We're coming back to the one-off transaction. What's key here is the relationship. And that's why we say that negotiations are all about relationships. Because in most of these situations, it's not only what you have, your resources, but it's who you're having the interaction with that dictates the situation that you're in. I like to give this example. Priscilla might recognize it from another session that she attended. I like to give this example of being lost on a desert island. You're lost on a desert island, and there's maybe 7 of you. And you have limited supplies, limited food. How would you think about making decisions that affect your on the island? Would you think about saying, look, I'm obviously the most important person here. I'm the oldest. I have the most experience. I think you should let me make all the decisions. Probably not. You need these people and they need you. You want a relationship with these people. You don't know how long you're going to be stuck on the desert island, right? So you think about, and you don't think about compromising. I'll give you this to eat if you give me that to eat. No, we all have to benefit, right? So you think about making decisions that will benefit the group for as long as you have to be together. Think about that relationship when you think about negotiations. I know that I had a lot of time. I will tell you, I like to be as interactive as possible. So I'd rather use the time to, if it's okay with my host, to answer questions, because I can talk at you for a long time. But if I'm not answering your questions, and if I'm not giving you the information you need, it's not really a valuable use of either of our time, and I'd like to have a relationship here. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen at this point. It's okay. And if I can remember how to do that, I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to say, anybody who has questions, Tosin, it's up to you, but they can put them in the chat. Not sure if you want them to come off the microphone at this point. You let us know.
Okay, so at this point, before we like just introduce get questions, I want us to just sort of have a quick summary of the presentation that you just had. I was taking some notes. I just wanted to try to summarize because it was quite a lot, right? So you started off with how over time, men and women, think of negotiation in different ways. Men tend to think of it as a sporting event, something that they go hard on, something that's like, they are just quite rather competitive about. And for women, it's more like most women feel like they are visiting a dentist, something that not quite enjoyable. And after that, then you talked about how negotiations most times is really about the relationships, right? The long-term relationships. Yeah. And those relationships are key, and that's what many of us should have in mind when negotiating whatever. And then you talked about the 5 different styles, right? First one is the competitive style. I think I should share my screen. The competitive style, then the accommodating style, avoiding, compromising, and collaborating, right? Where competitive is when I win, you lose. You go in hard, mostly for a one-off negotiation, right? And then accommodating is when you're a bit soft, you're willing to lose on this end and allow the other person win. Mm-hmm. And most times because you are really at fault, right? Maybe you already made some mistakes, and you're just accommodating, you're just willing to lose at this point and let the other person win. And the third one is avoiding. Generally, you just sort of avoid the scenario, just try to avoid all of it in total, because at this point you're ready to lose and the other person to lose. And this is mostly when at this point you realize that spending time on this negotiation doesn't really match what is to be benefited. So you're like, let's just forget about all of this, just avoid the entire negotiation and conversation in total. The fourth one is compromising, which I think you mentioned is more or less like the most popular, where you find some middle ground. I lose some, I win some, you lose some, you win some, and nothing left to offer. And the last one is collaborating, where you come together when you want long-term relationships, and everybody just wins. So I think that's just more like a very short short summary. We have somebody already that has his hands raised. Emeke, could you please unmute your so that you could ask? I believe you have a question. Or do you need?
Yes,
okay.
Tosin, thank you so much. Great conversation. I think there's a lot to learn, taking a lot of note as well. So I want to ask just two questions from two different perspectives. The first is from the relationship perspective. For a win-win situation, yes, we don't get that time. Like you rightly said, women think negotiation from a different point of view this compared to men. Men are a little bit more assertive, women are a little bit softer. So I think it's a miss of multiple level perspective, But what I actually want to ask is, in our modern world, as it relates to marital relationship, what is the middle ground? Because you don't get this win-win all the time. Where do you think we should pitch the middle ground for you to have an effective relationship? That's on one side. Still pointing to the collaborative style. In the business world, we say people go into business to maximize profit as much as possible. So even when doing the contracting, even when you know that the other partner doesn't have the knowledge, the technical knowledge to match your experience, you keep quiet, or you insert some clauses. Yeah, everybody goes home happy, but at the end of the day, you know exactly what you've done, until it gets to the point where you are asking for variations, you have some incidences, and you have to make some claims. But initially, it looks as if it's a win-win until you start having problems, and now see that, oh, this is not just a win-win thing. So where do you, as a business-minded person, where do you pitch your tent when you are going to that win-win kind of negotiation?
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, and interestingly, that's first of all, two fabulous questions, but interestingly, my answer goes in the same direction for both, which is what's the key to relationships? The key to relationships is getting to know the other person. I think, Tosin, you read my bio in the beginning, and you talked about the fact that I was an architect of our Allies for Gender Equity curriculum, right? And with our Allies for Gender Equity curriculum, everything that we talk about doesn't start with what actions should you take, and that was at the heart of your question, both of your questions, right? What action should I take? Rather, we start with our gender equity and allyship curriculum with understanding and perspective, right? So getting to know a situation, getting to know another person's perspective, getting to know what's important to that person, what's not important to that person, maybe doing some work in the background, right? So yes, there's still going to be situations where something will surprise you. And that's where recovery becomes important. So, but let me come back to the specific questions so I could give you examples for both. Remind me what I'm going to start with the latter, and then you can remind me what the first one is. With the latter one, you said it could look like a win-win. It could look like everything gets what they want. And then as time progresses, it looks like things kind of aren't exactly as they seem, right? Well, first of all, you have to ask the question, did I do the most work that I could have done beforehand to think about all of the scenarios in advance, right? Get to know that, get to know what's important to the other person, get to know what's important to them so you can work on that. But if it's an ongoing relationship going forward, right, then yes, this came up. We weren't aware of this problem before. Now we have to start from a different point, but we already have a relationship established from the first time. So we're not starting as strangers anymore. We're starting as people that are going through this together, right? Now, if the other person lies to you, if the other person cheats, that's a different story, right? You want to assume good intent, but because there's a relationship there, you can keep the process moving even when unexpected situations arise. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Okay. Well, remind me your first question.
So with respect to marital relationship, where is the middle ground in all this? Yes, we know you can't always get the win-win kind of situation. Men will be men, women will be women, either way. So where will be the middle ground, such a way that everybody's happy to create a effective relationship going? Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a more difficult question to answer, because sometimes you have to look at what's the overall goal for all of us, not just for me, not just for you. What's the overall goal? So again, I work with gender equity a lot, and I think about allyship. And there's a lot of men that see the situation with allyship as, but if I give up a job for a woman, then that's a job that I'm not getting. It's an I lose situation for someone else. But when you think about the overall objective, when you think about, should we have gender equity in society? Do I have daughters that I want to live in a more equitable workspace? You look at the bigger picture and you think, well, maybe I do want to give in that situation. So for me, the middle ground is, okay, I'm willing to give a little bit, right? Maybe you're not in that situation. Maybe you don't want to give. That's fine. Everyone has to find that middle ground for themselves, but think about it beyond the situation. What's most important to you? What are your principles? What are your beliefs, right? And what is necessary? I can't give up that job. I need to feed my family right now, right? But you have to weigh pros and cons of everything. I wish I could tell you there's a firm line in the sand. There's not.
No, you've done so well already. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. We have somebody else that has his hands up. Galvin, would you please just unmute and ask your question? Okay.
Yes, thank you, Tosin. Hi, Emmy, how are you? Okay, so this is a very, very insightful topic, and thank you so much for the delivery. Even while you were answering Emeke's question, you have rightly answered some of my the questions I want to ask, right? But however, I would want you to help us a little bit to dive into negotiation and the win-win part of negotiation when it comes to business. So from my knowledge in procurement, where you look at win-win is when it comes to how significant is negotiation to both parties, right? Your relationship, how significant is very, very important. So when you begin to see how significant it is, or if this person is a significant buyer or seller to you, that is when you understand that even when you're not winning all, you also need this person for the future, right? So I want you to help us just streamline it. I know you've said a lot that answers it all. So where is the best, how is effective communication very important when it comes to strategic importance, right?
Yeah.
So how is it important, effective communication? Because I think this helps very, very well for us to achieve win-win in negotiation. So, and the second point I want to make is that this is very, very important when you understand what is the next person's, what is important to the next person. If you're able to understand what is important to the next person, and you are also communicating what is important to you, then the both of you can be able to get a win-win situation, understanding that this is a long-term relationship that's going to come out from a win-win situation. So just help us put it in perspective. You said a lot while you were answering Emeke's question to answer. Thank you.
No. It's a fascinating question, and I have to tell you why. Because full disclosure, I'm very unapologetically American. right? So I have a very US centric view of business. And I know that when I was at Wharton, and obviously we had, 40% international students at that time, international meaning non-US. There's different styles in different countries. So I'm probably going to answer, full disclosure, I'm probably going to answer from a US perspective. I understand, and I would appreciate it if any of you would correct me and say, that's not going to work here. I will tell you that one thing that we're becoming more and more understanding of in the US business culture is the idea of authenticity. And that's an often thrown about word. A lot of people say, oh, I'm authentic, I want to be real. And then they're not, right? So I don't mean authenticity as just this general concept. I mean being honest about what's important to you, right? But also being honest about what you're willing to give, right? So in every one of those situations that you talked about before, you talked about the relationship was important. If people are a little bit more candid with each other, then you can kind of move forward. So I've definitely been in situations where I have said to people that I work with, this is really important to my boss. I need to make this happen. This is very important to my boss. But I understand that you need to satisfy your boss too. What do I need to do so that we can work together? And I just call it out. Now, if you haven't figured this out, I'm very candid, I'm very authentic. It took me a long time, 56 years to get to this point where like I practice radical honesty. It's not always the case, and culturally, it's not always appropriate to do. But I think the more you can lean into the idea of putting up front what is your most important objective in any negotiations, to the majority that you could do that, you're going to be in a better position. And you mentioned communications, and I wrote that down because you brought up a point that I didn't, which is negotiations. It's funny, in the books that I reference, they always talk about negotiations being face-to-face. I can't underscore that a lot. Now, face-to-face often means Zoom, right, in our virtual world. When you write things down, sometimes you can't read context, right? You also can't read reaction. So in as much as possible, oral communication is preferable when you're negotiating. Now, there comes a point when you have to then confirm and write things down, but initial transactions should usually be in person. Does that help?
Yes, it does. It
Okay.
does. Thank
Okay.
you so much.
Okay, was there a second part that I missed? I'm so sorry. I feel like, did I answer both parts of your question?
Yes, you have.
Okay.
One thing I stressed out, and you have lauded it, is the importance of you bringing out what is most important to you in consideration with what is important to the next party. So once you have that and communicate it effectively, then there's going to be a win-win situation there. So, and you've stressed, so thank you so much, Amy. I really appreciate this. Thank you.
Of course. And Tosin, you actually, when you summed it up, right, and you talked about the avoidance time, and it's right, that's a perfect example of sometimes your emotions get in the way, right? And what's really important to us is that we need to feed ourselves for this evening, not that I get my restaurant or you get your restaurant choice, right? Sometimes it's easier to just walk away. Forget it. We're just going to eat at home. We're not going to go out, right? But if we go back to what are the most important points that we're trying to solve, that's when it usually that's the key to like kind of the effective communication. That's the key to the win-win. That's the key to knowing when like the tenor of the situation.
But however, please, just one more, sorry, Tosin, sorry, please, again, all the points that comes from negotiation, accommodating, avoiding, collaborating, and compromising. One thing I want to say from all of them is you need to put in perspective to, for you to understand what is important per time, right? Sometimes in business, accommodating. When it's transactional, you just want to have a transactional meeting and just buy a one-off and go. So most times avoiding all those comes in negotiation, and it can be considered. But the most important is win-win, which is what you have taught us today. And thank you so much, Amy.
Yeah, no, of course. Thank you. Very insightful question so far.
Yeah, thank you very much. So we still have time for a few more questions. Please, if you have questions, you can use the chat box if you don't want to talk, but we prefer if you would just like raise your hand on mute and just, ask the questions directly.
And
I do have, okay.
I was just going to say, did you see there is a question in the chat?
Oh, I did not see that. Let me quickly,
are there times when you
okay, are there times where you need to take, oh, very good question. Please take that. Please take that.
Yeah. There are times when you need to take a break from life. Let's be honest, right? Sometimes relationships are difficult. And especially if you think about negotiations, in terms of relationships, there are times that you need a break. Of course, absolutely. However, are there, that is more when you say, are there times that you need a break in negotiations? I wasn't sure if you were talking about, so maybe you can clarify for me. I wasn't sure if you mean in the middle of the actual interaction, do you sometimes need to walk away, or were you talking about just in general in life? Because I answered obviously in life. If you're talking about the latter, right? If you're talking about, are there times in the middle of kind of an interaction that you need to walk away? Absolutely, right? In all of those situations. Sometimes, when you're in the avoiding, I talked about that before. Are your emotions getting in the way? You're getting crowded? Can we just take a time out? I want to go back and reflect on what's really important to me. Or if you're trying to get to the win-win, like we were just talking about with Galvin, right? If you're trying to get to the win-win, sometimes it's, hold on, now we're both digging in our heels, but let me come back, let me take a break, let me reset, let me go back and reflect on what's most important to me, and let me come back to you. In just 5 minutes, let me come back to you. Breaks are always good. I think as like certainly in the US, I just think as a global culture these days, we're reactive. We're tied to our phones. We're tied to the dings and the alerts and the truth of the matter, and especially in any business culture, right? There's messages coming in at all different times. Anytime you can take a moment and sit back and reflect on what's coming at you, it can only be a positive.
Yeah, that was a good, very good answer. So we also have somebody with his hands up. Would you quickly just unmute? Romanos. So can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you too, Sim.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to confirm. So Romanos, if you could just help us unmute and ask your question. Okay,
Thank
so
you
while we wait, okay.
Thank you so much. It's been an insightful discussion there. I just want to ask a question, especially Nigeria is a very litigious community. Of course, I am a lawyer and I've seen a number of negotiations fail. And I want to just ask a simple question. Do we necessarily need to bring in emotion into negotiation? Because most times you'll find out negotiation fails simply because of ego. So at what point do we allow ego and emotion play a part in our negotiation?
That is a question asked by a lawyer and probably best answered by a lawyer, because you've probably been trained to leave emotion sometimes out of it, right? And so it's really funny that you say that. As humans, we do tend to invest emotions, whether it's warranted or not, right? Is it best to leave emotion out of it? Sometimes. helps sometimes, not all the time. Remember, we're talking about relationships, right? So when you say emotions, yeah, you can talk about ego and pride, but you can also talk about sympathy and empathy and caring. And if you're in a situation where you're negotiating and it is very clear to you that the other person is going through a very difficult time, right? And, maybe it's professional, maybe that person is down 4 staff members and can't, and really is just running ragged because they're doing the work of 5 people now. And you could probably take advantage of that person pretty easily. You could probably get it, but do you want a long-term relationship with that person? Or do you want to win in this particular situation, right? So unfortunately, I understand the spirit of your question, right? Emotions, and you're saying, because there are negative emotions. There's ego, there's pride, sometimes there's just the wanting to win just for winning's sake. I mean, not sure about you, but I like to win, right? But think about the flip side of emotions and think about the caring and the empathy and the sympathy and the understanding, right? And it comes back to what Galvin was talking about before, right? It talks about it's to what we were talking about before. What's important to you long term, right? It's hard to think about if you're going to think about where that line in the sand is. It's hard to think about that without pulling in emotions, right? This is just an aside, and I just want to say this, or I just want to say one aside, but my boss and I used to argue all the time in the beginning of all of our work in the ally space. And the reason we argued is because she said, I don't like to hear that men care about women's rights or women in the workplace now that they have daughters. Why did they not care before? Why did they not care before? And I would argue back, I don't care why they care. I care that they care. Right? So I'm saying the same thing to you, that yes, emotions are instrumental in getting you to a certain point, right? When they get in the way, I agree with you. You have to kind of, and that's when the last question is perfect. Take a step back. Am I doing this because my ego's in the way? Is the other person doing this because their ego's in the way? How can I diffuse the situation? Maybe let's take a step back. I'm sorry I got off on a tangent there, but you just your question made me think of that story where my boss literally and I argued about this for 2 years. And I said, I don't care why they care. I just want them to care. So.
Yeah, so yes, I was going to say that. So that was very well put. So please, participants, if you still have questions, please, you can always just raise your hand or put it in the chat box, whatever you prefer. While we're waiting for that, I do have like 1 or 2 questions, and I somewhat believe I've already answered some of them already. But in practice, during negotiation, and we just realized that the other party is not responding to our compromising behavior. The other party is not willing to even listen. There are some people that just want to win. They don't really care what you're trying to offer, or maybe for some reason they have some form of upper hand, and then they're not just responding to how you're trying to compromise, how you're trying to find that middle line. What do you do in such situations?
Yeah. So I do present quite often, but I also craft presentations for other staff members at Forte, and we collectively were trying to create a presentation for my boss that she was talking to a group of MBA women, and you'll see where I'm going in a minute with this. And we wanted to give them advice for going out in the working world and asking for what they want, right? Not being shy about asking for what they want, whatever it is, more money, whatever. But we also told them that they need to be willing to walk away, right? So Tosin, I think your question comes down to, when are you willing to walk away, right? There are some situations, if the person has the upper hand and you need what they have, you can't walk away, right? You do have to give a little bit. But there's other situations where, oh, I'm looking for a supplier. I'm glad that you're my supplier, but did you know that there's a supplier down the street? And yeah, I don't have a 4-year relationship with them, but I'm willing to start a 4-year relationship with them because you're not helping me and you're not meeting me in the middle. So it kind of depends. You have to know the point at which you're willing to walk away. And so sometimes, unfortunately, you become in that situation where you have nothing left to give. It's not that you're at fault, but you need the other person. So it's not a satisfying answer. I get that. Negotiation isn't always satisfying, right? But you have to think about when you're willing to walk away. And I do think that a lot of times for security reasons, we talk ourselves into things, right? We talk ourselves into, I need this supplier because they know me and I don't want to have to start over with a new supplier and it's just easy. Okay, so it's a little bit more difficult, but is it making other parts of your life unbearable, right? Like your bottom line. So I think you have to think about when you're willing to walk away and when you're not.
Yeah, okay. I think that makes sense, right? Okay, so one other question. So what would you say are common mistakes that people make or can make during negotiations? You know, there are 1,000,001 things you can negotiate about. What do you think are those common mistakes, things that people could just not realize they have done, but
Brilliant question. Brilliant question. And I apologize because I should have put this in my presentation because you just made me think about it. You know how I said everything's negotiable, right? Chances are when you go into a situation, you don't just want one thing, right? You probably have multiple things that are important to you. And I think what happens is we tend to think that we're negotiating for one thing instead of thinking about the priority, the order of priorities in which many things are important to us, right? So I'm going to give you an example of a job negotiations, right? We go in there and we say, title and salary, those are the most important things to me. And I want this title and I want this salary, and that's what I'm negotiating for. So I either get it or I don't. But maybe you forget that, you know, given your home situation right now, you could use some flexibility in the workplace, right? Maybe you could use a 4-day work week, like a longer work week, of your work day, but in a 4-day work week, because for whatever reason, you need that extra day. Maybe what's important to you is you want to get the experience from this job. This is the company, this is the only company that has this kind of experience. And that's really important to me because once I have that experience, I can write my ticket going forward, right? So I think the biggest mistake that people make is that they think that there's only they only think about kind of one or two things that are important to them, and they forget to understand that all of those other priorities that play a role here are equally important. And just because you're not getting one doesn't mean you're not getting the other, right? So you don't say, I'm not taking that job at this salary because it's not worth it. No, but what are all the other benefits that this job offers? So there's such a clear answer for that one. I really appreciate the question. I'm sorry that I didn't put that in my presentation.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. So just want to wrap up the webinar, the program. I want to remind every one of us that there's an handout shared to us via email, right? Audio would send that to everybody's email addresses after the event. Audio, could you please just share the slide so that we can just wrap up today's event? Thank you very much, Amy. I feel like we could have had this conversation for the rest of the day because
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it. And thank you, Priscilla, for reaching out in the first place.
Okay, so at this, I just quickly want to call on our program chairperson for SPE Lagos, Mr. Oluwabi Abotuko, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Tosin, please confirm that you can hear me.
Yes, I can, please. I can.
Awesome, thank you. Great. So thank you very much for the excellent presentation. I really want to appreciate you for delivering and also spending time to to answer all the questions that we had. So on behalf of the Lagos Section Board, SP Lagos Section 61, and our section chair, Mrs. Prinsler, would like to thank you, Amy, for the wonderful and excellent presentation you just gave to us. I would also like to thank everyone who has joined us for this presentation. I want to believe that we'll be sharing the slide packs and to some of the people that have requested it, and I believe it should be shared to everyone that actually registered and joined for this event. With that, I would say please ensure to join us for other programs that will be shared shortly, and be sure to follow us on all our social media platforms. So we have these events coming up. We have the impacts of AI, machine learning, and data science skills on your career coming up on February 17th. We also have the board event on March 4th. Our D&I week actually be taking place next week between February 22nd and 25th. And then the big one, SP Lagos at 50, will be happening between March 24th and 26th. And we have a lot of events suitable to everyone in SP and also in the community at large. So we have a golf tournament, and we also have a YP networking cocktail, and that'll be taking place Friday for March. We'll also be having SP Lagos at 50 technical lecture on Saturday, 25th of March. That same Saturday, we'll also be having the All-Star football match that'll be taking place, also that day. We will, on Sunday, which will be the grand finale, and the day SP Lagos actually turns 50, with the 50th anniversary banquet, and I'll be launching the only scholarship fund on that day also. And so that the different events we have, the slide you're seeing is showing the only scholarship award that would like to have you participate in, give back to to students so that they can have time to concentrate on studies in school. So we have the one that you give them that will be able to cover an undergraduate scholarship in geoscience and energy engineering faculties. We also have one that is just for females undergraduates in science and engineering. And we also have one for general STEM scholarship for secondary school students. So this scholarship range between 550K and 1,000 naira. You can pay directly into SP Lagos section account, or you can check with officials here, and they will tell you how to send your contribution in. You can join us to renew your membership. The contacts being displayed on the screen for Alessia Ziwani, Adewale Ogunleye, and Odio Okosun, they can be contacted and reached for you to renew your membership today. So please join us and renew. Now you can follow SP Lagos on all our social media platform. We have Twitter. We are also on Instagram, on Facebook, and YouTube. And this video will be available on our YouTube. You can go back, check this presentation, and replay over and over again if you missed any part of it. So yes, the recording will be made available. Mukhtar, I can see your question will be made available. So just go to our YouTube, and I think an email blast will also go out for you to click on the link and watch this on demand. Again, please register, for it as an SP member, and there are several benefits that you get to gain from being a member of SP. I believe now it's time for us to take the photo session. Odeon, Tosin, I'm handing over back to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Oluwabi, for the announcement and sharing our upcoming events. At this point, we're officially ending our program, but before we just leave, we want to take a quick photo session. Please, I indulge everyone to just share their video so that we could just take a snapshot of the gallery of our participants. Amy, please, could you please just share your video very quick? Yes, so we're not going to take so much time. I do appreciate everyone that has come today. I say a big thank you to our speaker, Amy, for honoring our invitation, sharing with us for about 15 minutes and answering numerous questions. I say a big thank you, and to all our participants that have registered and have joined us today. We say a big thank you, and we're hoping to see you in our upcoming events. At this point, please, I can see very lovely smiling faces. If we could have just a few more, and Odion will just take the screenshots. Odion, please let me know when you have had a couple of screenshots.
All right, I'm ready and itchy to click. Can we put on our smiley faces? All right, thank you.
Yes, please. Smile, guys.
Click it right away. Okay. Thank you. I'll go to page 2, and yeah, a couple of smiley faces here as well. Okay, that'll be all. Thank you. Back to you, Tosin.
Yes, so at this point, I say a big thank you. In SPE Lagos, we always say SPE oil and gas, but I see that people are even dropping off to go. But yeah, at this point, I just say a big thank you for coming. Have a lovely day and enjoy the rest of your day, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. The link is going down now. Enjoy your day.